So I've got a fun deck brew to share with you all today. It is a Satymber Centaurbor combo deck. I've been theory crafting this list for the past few days and just want to share it with you all and get some feedback as well, so when I can start testing, I can hopefully make this the best it can be. So my game plan with this deck is to go Satymber, empower with an artifact, attack over an opponent's Elestral in the late game when they are at a low spirit count. That way, when it destroys the Elestral in battle, I can Nexus the spirits onto the Satymber, ascend into the Centaurbor. Since it's considered a new Elestral by the game rules, it can attack right away with 5 spirits, and pretty much put the opponent in a lose-lose situation. Either they take the 5 to face, or however many, because I'm attacking over an attack position Elestral, and that puts my opponent at such low spirits that they can't effectively answer it. Or they're having to use all those spirits to actually answer the Centaurbor, in which case it's a win-win regardless, as long as we've got a follow-up to try to close out the game. Because I'm all hedging on that Centaurbor attack, I don't actually run the Foloi Forest in the deck for the protection, because I don't expect it to really matter next turn if the Foloi Forest up is protecting it, and it does not have much synergy with the deck, as you will soon see, so I decided not to focus on that one. But as for the ratios, 3 Satymber because we want to see this to initiate our combo, and the 1 of Centaurbor because Satymber can easily search it out. I think it would be correct to run another Centaurbor in the side deck if we're running against a deck that can effectively mill it, or possibly loop it out of hand in those scenarios, but for the most part, I think the 1 Centaurbor in most matchups will be fine. Now, of course, we need an artifact to pair with the Satymber, and most of the time people run the Scythe of Demeter, but I actually think the Trident of Poseidon is a bit better here, paired, of course, with the 2 Poseidon. And that's because one of the biggest answers to this deck, mainly on the Satymber turn, will be counter runes, and Trident of Poseidon shuts down what I think is the most effective one against Satymber, that being Shield of Achilles. Now, it is important to note that Trident will not shut down other counter runes such as Tsunami, Altar, and Gorgon's Gaze, as those cards can be chained to the cast of Trident and affect the Satymber switching to defense position or prevent it from attacking outright. But the idea is that they're not hard counters, so as long as we've got our own way to protect the Satymber going into the next turn, we can always retry it the very next turn if able. So it's not necessarily the best case scenario, but being able to at least stop one of them and forcing the opponent to try to use some other answers isn't the worst thing. And also, we can actually play around Tsunami with Poseidon. If we Nexus a Water Spirit to the 1 spirit we're going to send off a Satymber in before we even go into the show the Trident or the Satymber, at that point, once we ascend to Satymber, we got a Water Spirit on it, and it is protected from Tsunami. And also, the other nice thing about Trident is, of course, when we go into the Centaurbor, we no longer have Trident protecting us from counter runes, but we have Water Spirits on the Centaurbor, meaning that Tsunami is one less counter the deck, and it's probably going to be it's generally speaking the most effective one. So I do like that protection. So of course it's not foolproof against the counter runes. It would be a bit too much work, I think, to make this deck foolproof to all of them. But that being said, though, I think that this is the most effective way to help us maneuver around it, and just some good plays and probably a little bit of luck can get us there with these cards. 2-2 split because we just want to find 1 copy to be able to initiate our combo, and we've got consistency cards to help find them. We don't really want to be bricking on them, especially in the early game, where we want to be trying to get our opponent to use spirits to get in a position where we can do our OTK. Speaking of those consistency cards, the first one is the Elechik here to help us find our Poseidon. This card isn't terrible here. Out of element, yes, but for attack is decent, and just being able to search it out of deck, pinpoint search, is great. We do run plenty of counter runes in this deck just to help it out, so there will be chances where we can even just throw this down on an empty board, get our Divine Rune poke for 1, and it is a-okay. So again, just being able to find out those Poseidons is going to be super crucial for this deck, and also this does have some additional synergies with the deck, as we'll see when we talk about the artifact searchers. And those artifact searchers are 1 Sproutyr and 1 Hephaestus. So the Hephaestus here is the reason I say Elechik does have more use than just searching out the Atlantis, because really Elechik can extend into either, sorry, not the Atlantis, the Poseidon can really extend into either Poseidon or Trident, either by grabbing, of course, the Poseidon or grabbing the Hephaestus, which can search out the Trident. This just comes at a 1 Fire Spirit premium, but I think that is a-okay because it does not take up our normal cast. Sproutyr here also because if we have another kind of open board state, kind of what I mentioned with the Elechik, opponent doesn't have Elestral on board, or going first, Sproutyr is great just to be able to search out an artifact with a decent body with that 5 defense, meaning it would be difficult for the opponent to attack over. The reason I don't run more Sproutyr, despite it being in element, meaning it's an easy ascension target off of Satymber, is because I think the best way for this deck to go to get the opponent to low spirit counts is being able to throw out big Elestrals to attack, to try to make sure my opponent doesn't set up a bunch of Elestrals and start ascending against me, and also by attacking with those cards, it might incentivize my opponent to use their counter runes so they don't fall behind on board presence either, and Sproutyr just doesn't provide that. There isn't enough really decent stall, I think, in Earth, or what would work for this deck for me to feel comfortable stalling it out. So I just think the one Sproutyr on those situations as a consistency card is a-okay. The final consistency card I run is the 3 Astrabbit here. And that is because we cannot search out the Satymber currently in this deck build, and Astrabbit is just a better way to more consistently find it, since it can look at top 3 and pull it out. So it's not a guaranteed search, but it does help us find various pieces at various stages of the game. You know, it's just a generically good searcher, or good consistency tool overall. So I do think it is worth running as a 3-of. So now we've got 3 great Elestrals to throw down on a starting board with that 5 defense going first, and we can always weave in Astrabbit at other intervals as well. And honestly, if we already have our combo pieces and just need an Earth Elestral on board, since we need our opponent to have an Elestral anyway, just throwing this on the board as a 5 body with an Earth Spirit and defense isn't too terrible as well. So, I mean, I feel like this card really doesn't need as much explanation as I gave it, because, yeah, we just want to find our cards, and I think this card is great with that big body. As for the remaining Elestrals, I just chose to run a bunch of 5 attackers to be able to contest the board, to control the board. We're not trying to be too aggressive, just pretty much control the board, but of course we can always switch it to more aggression if need be. But first off, we got the 3 Vysceris. This one just makes sense. It's an element, easily can ascend Satymber off of any of these, and on top of that, this can spawn extra buys, means easier to stick a buy to ascend into, and it's just a great control / offensive Elestral overall, being able to scale even higher than 5 attack as you get multiples out on board, and if we can even just get 2 to stick for a turn, it's going to be really difficult for our opponent to be able to answer it. So this one just was an obvious pick. I also run the 3 Necruff here. This is just a good 5 attacker. We do run Fire Spirit, so we could get this burn effect, but that's not the focus of it. The idea is that I'm just misenchanting with an Earth, so I have the option to send off it into Satymber, but for the most part, it's just a great card to contest the board and to be able to attack, to either get stuff off the board from my opponent, not letting them get ahead, or just provoke my opponent to use the counter runes, gain them ever so close to being in lethal range for Centaurbor. And the same exact logic runs for the 2 Soarlet here. Same thing as Necruff. I don't even run any Wind Spirit, so I'm not flipping stuff around. It's just for that 5 attack. I'm always going to be misenchanting with an Earth Spirit. So with the Elestrals out of the way, how I rounded off my deck is just generic good stuff. I mean, counter runes are the meta right now, so of course I'm running a heavy counter rune package. 3 Tsunami, because this is just a very effective answer to slow down my opponent and protect my own Elestrals against stuff. It's also nice because I do need Elestrals to attack over, so just being able to have an Elestral on board, flip up Tsunami when my opponent tries to answer it, just means my opponent's got an Elestral on board. I get to keep my Elestral on board, and I can start ascending. So that's great. Also, 3 Gorgon's Gaze. This card is also great just to shut down various effects that can be problematic, but also being able to stop stuff from attacking. I mean, there are so many uses I can't begin to explain it. This card is very much a card that you just need to kind of keep using to see all the scenarios around and keep discussing it. It's so good. And then, of course, our 3 Poison Tipped Arrow to help keep Elestrals off of board. -2 attack can sometimes create awkward situations for the opponent where they need to commit more to attack over stuff, which is nice, but also just being able to destroy stuff and keep my opponent off of really powerful tools such like Astrabbit is great. And of course, the 3 is Shield of Achilles, our most common battle trick, just to kind of protect an Elestral from being attacked over if need be, and keep my opponent off stuff on board, just kind of making sure that the tempo is regulated more easily. This is what this card does best. Carrying the cards that should be pretty self-explanatory as we keep going over deck profiles and you keep seeing them again. 3 Earthquake. Obviously, this one is an element for this deck, since it is a more Earth-focused deck, despite all the out-of-element cards. Just pop an Elestral on board, just get rid of that problematic thing, no problem. And if your opponent gets too far ahead, this can help you catch up. Again, I think that just target destroy Elestral is really good, should be pretty self-explanatory. And for the final 2 cards of the deck, I just run 2 Ambrosia. This deck can be a bit expensive at times, and we're running so many elements. This is just a great way to make sure that we still have a little extra gas to kind of close out the game, and also loop back specific spirits that we need to, because our spirit deck will definitely need a lot of mind on how to manage those spirits. Then moving on to the spirit deck, I run 10 of the Earth Spirits because we are an Earth-focused deck, so that makes a lot of sense. 5 Leviaphin. The theory behind this one is that we need at least 2 for we need 2 for the Trident, 1 for the Poseidon, because we won't always be going for that play to protect against the Tsunami, so we don't always need the extra spirit for it. And then just 2 extra spirits, 1 either for that Poseidon play, really 2 in case we see those 2 Tsunami is the theory behind this one. And then we've got the 4 Zaptor here because we do run the Elechik and the Astrabbit. Honestly, I could see this going down to 3, just 1 for the Elechik and then up to 2 for the Astrabbit if you need the extra search. I could even see arguing down to just 2 copies, 1 for an Elechik, 1 for an Astrabbit. But I feel like I had some extra wiggle room in here just in case I need the extra spirits just to re-enchant to keep searching out pieces if an Astrabbit sticks around on board. So I think that is fine there. And then the 1 Vipyro just for that 1 Hephaestus. All we need is that 1 if we're using the Hephaestus. We just need the 1, search out the 1, and we are a-okay. Almost forgot to add that the reason there isn't a side deck for this deck is because it is an initial list, and unlike the Voltempest list, which I do have some experience with in previous iterations from earlier in the year, this one's a brand new list, so I just decided I didn't want to try to come up with a side deck and like labor over all the different scenarios. I'd rather just wait until I test the deck and craft a side deck around what I notice I may need. As for mulliganing, if I see multiples of my Sproutyr and Centaurbor, most of the time I want to mulligan them back, and even if I see like 2 Poseidon and two Trident, like if my hand is clogged up with all these combo pieces, I'm saying mulligan those back. You need them in the late game, not the early game, and I don't think holding on to them, especially if you don't have a lot of the other pieces to start whittling down your opponent, isn't worth it. But as for what you do want to see, going first, I would say definitely stuff like the Elechik to start searching out your pieces. Sproutyr and Astrabbit are 2 of your best cards to get started out with. Arguably, Astrabbit is the best. And then going second, what you want to see is probably some more of your cards to contest the board. Earthquake, probably not super necessary, but can be good. But stuff like the Vysceris, and arguably better would be stuff like the Necruff and the Soarlet, just because you'd rather save the Vysceris for the late game to help you more easily establish a body on board. And whether you're going first or second, you do want to see some combination of your counter runes here, so your opponent can't get too far ahead with you. If you don't see counter runes, a lot of times you're struggling to establish and maintain board state. But that is my deck list for Satymber Centaurbor combo. I know a lot of deck lists I've seen before like to run a heavy earth focus with a lot of the good earth stuff, usually running the Foloi Forest to give protection to Centaurbor, using the Scythe to recuperate spirits, and definitely running more Sproutyr than I am. But I think that this deck will be better suited into the meta than that variant, and that's kind of what I was wanting to focus on. But I could be very wrong. This could still be an absolutely clunky mess. I mean, again, this is just pure theory. One thing I think I forgot to mention was, as mentioning, I only run 1 of the Satymber because it doesn't mesh well. It's not very offensive. I want to contest the board. Meanwhile, I'm running 3 Astrabbit and didn't mention why I thought that was okay. And part of it was because this is just such a great generic search card. It really does help me find my Satymbers, and that's what I was worried about. So most of the time, I'd rather play an Astrabbit than a Satymber, so I don't really want to double up on 2 defensive bodies when I do want to be contesting the board. That is the reason why there. But with that being said, though, let me know down in the comments below. What do you think of my deck list? Do you think that it's going to completely flop? Do you have some suggestions to try to make this better? I would just love to know as I start to test this deck, test out new ideas, and see what works the best. That's kind of my goal here. And of course, if you're looking forward to more content, please consider subscribing and turning on the notification bell so you're notified when I do upload those videos, as I plan to start getting into making some gameplay videos. Probably going to be testing this one. Don't want to promise anything right now, but I mean, hey, I'm keep talking about I want to test this deck, so that's probably what it will end up being. But with that being said, though, look forward to more content coming out real soon.